Hello there everyone, and welcome back to a later than planned but Void Dwarf Studio episode. And I have to say, I am sorry for the delay. Life and work and, general shenanigans just kind of slowed me down a bit. But I'm going to get back on track, and this video is going to be released the same day I record it, so yeah, today. Anyway, the Imperial Guard, the Astra Militarum, the poor unfortunate bastards who have to face almost all of the galaxy's horrors with nothing but a combat knife, some fairly flimsy armour, a las gun which, in 40k terms, is not much better than a laser pointer, and commissars who will shoot you in the back of the head if you even think about running away. Yeah. Welcome to the Guard, son. The Imperial Guard has been around in one shape or form basically since the Horus Heresy, although back then the Imperial Guard was a very different entity. Back then they were primarily used for holding worlds as opposed to conquering them. It was the Space Marines, the Adeptus Astartes, who went forth and did most of the conquering. Back then they were known as the Imperialis Auxilia, or the Imperial Army, comprising of men, women in both the spaceships, the men and women on the ground, the Air Force, every aspect that you can imagine, much like a modern military in our time. However, during the Horus Heresy, many of these Imperialis Auxilia turned traitor along with, the Chaos Space Marines as they're now known. And one of the big differences that came about after the Horus Heresy was the fact that the Imperium decided this kind of rubbish could not be allowed to happen again. And so, because the Space Marines were split from legions to become chapters, the Imperial Senate decided that the Imperial Army had to follow a similar process. In this way, the Imperial Auxilia were split into different branches, and then these groups were then subdivided. So, for example, the army is split into the infantry, the heavy support, tank support, so on and so forth. The idea being that if one squad of Imperial Guard turned traitor for any reason, the worst thing they can do is affect several other Imperial Guard infantry squads. Rather than an entire army turning traitor in one go, only subdivisions of it could, which meant that then the other loyal sections of the army can just, round on these traitors and blow them sky high. It's a relatively effective strategy to avoid corruption, however, it does mean that the Imperial Guard are fractured. Many regiments not only don't work well together because of this, but frankly, they can be almost hostile to one another. You'll have the Imperial Navy looking down on the Imperial Guard looking down on the Imperial Navy, and, well, everyone kind of distrusts one another. It's a very complicated balancing act to get the right mix. However, most Imperial Guard commanders know this, and they will do their best to organize these battle forces so that they can be the most cohesive. Anyway, the modern Imperial Guard army has mainly an aggressive function. Whilst there are Imperial worlds who do have Imperial Guard regiments on board, because, well, one of the produce of an Imperial world can be troops. This is far from uncommon. There are planets who are entirely dedicated to exporting their own manpower, such as the Cadians and Mordians and Catachan jungle fighters are the ones on the top of my head, but there are several other planets who also export troops as a, means of keeping themselves going. There are some planets who rely on this so much that, frankly, if their armed forces were no longer required, they would kind of starve to death. The Imperial worlds are not often a great place to live. However, they do create some rather fantastic, crazy, wonderful fighters. So, how does an average citizen get into the Imperial Guard? As this is, of course, an overview video, I will try to elaborate on this. Technically, any Imperial citizen can become an Imperial Guard member. You basically just have to sign up. And frankly, considering some Imperial worlds, I'd rather be in the Imperial Guard than anywhere else. Yes, you do have a very broody and overzealous commissar yelling into your face left, right and centre, including sergeants and other upper command staff who will also yell at you left, right and centre, but you get off planet, you get basic training, you get to see a bit of the galaxy, you get to take in some interesting scenery, and you well, doesn't really get much better after that. The average Imperial Guard lifespan when they actually hit into a war zone is approximately 24 hours. Yeah, war in the 41st millennium is brutal. Absolutely brutal. And it's not for the faint of heart. And frankly, most Imperial Guardsmen don't even live that long. And it's not just quote-unquote Homo sapiens that also get to join the Imperial Guard. There are several strains of what the Imperium class as stable mutations. These typically take the form of either Ogrins or Ratlings, although there are various other subcategories such as Beastmen, Cat People. Yes, there are Cat People in the 41st millennium, Neko, etc. Oh god. And there are a couple other very similar kind of variations on this sort of strain. There were, for example, Squats, dwarvish individuals, but the Imperium doesn't tend to treat these sub-races well, as they like to call them. Basically, if you don't look human, you are going to be heavily discriminated. And when I say discriminated, I mean shot, or at the very least beaten up on a regular basis, and or just suspected of all kinds of wrongdoing, no matter how innocent you might be. This is why, typically speaking, any form of subhuman regiment is carefully monitored by commissars, and not given any inch to move. But I will talk about the two most common ones here. You have Ogrins, giant humanoid creatures, who are allowed in the Imperium because they are, well, close enough to being human. Otherwise, they would have just wiped them out long ago. It's a stable, mutated strain of human, not famed for their intelligence, famed for being really great bruisers and being able to hold fantastically heavy guns, as well as, well, running up and punching people in the face really, really hard. Which, when you're a regiment that mostly relies on numbers, having a big brute who can actually hit harder than the average human is frickin' fantastic. And then, of course, you have the complete opposite end of the scale in the form of a Ratling. Although, frankly, to me, these fellas look more like beardy halflings, but hey-ho, what do I know? The halflings are... halflings. Oh, boy. The Ratlings are famed snipers. They are very, very good at hiding themselves, they're very good at getting into advantageous positions, and, well, taking out key targets. Although, don't let them around your food supplies for too long, because I can't imagine they'll last with these fellas around. So, where are the Imperial Guard employed? Well, first of all, you need to understand that every single Imperial planet has some form of planetary defense, known as a PDF force. This is not an Imperial Guard regiment, these are civilian militia of a sort. They will more often than not be given substandard weaponry. They're not really designed to be much of a combat force. They're more designed to hold the enemy for a brief period of time and to slow the advance. They were never really designed to actually win a war. They are just there to hold the enemy still long enough for the Imperial Guard or the Space Marines to turn up. If Space Marines are nearby, but they manage to grab a hold of an Imperial Navy vessel who has just so happened to have a lovely troop complement of Imperial Guard on board, then, well, today is your lucky day. The Imperial Guard will then turn up with various other elements, including, tanks, aircraft, all the other funky fun things. They'll make sure they're fully supplied, and then they will try and push back the enemy. Obviously, they will also try and encourage the Imperial Navy to blast anything in orbit to make this process a little easier. Because once you establish void superiority, you have a much easier time ridding yourself of whatever's on the planet. And yeah, the Imperial Guard will then just use whatever tactics at their disposal and whatever they specialize in to wipe out the enemy. You have the Cadian Imperial Guard, famed for their ability to follow orders to the letter, and also to, well, being the most common Imperial Guard soldier out there. This is why most people recognize Cadians, because they're the most common model in the Warhammer range. Following up that, you have the Catachans, who are famous jungle fighters who specialize in ambushes and surprise attacks. These guys make Arnie and his group of buddies during the Predator movie look, frankly, meek and mild. The world they come from is just all kinds of insanity. And it's a jungle that's constantly trying to eat you in every single conceivable way. You have the Valhallan Ice Warriors, who are famous for basically taking horrendous casualties and carrying on regardless of the odds. And you've also got the Deathcore Krieg, Nutters, if ever I heard of them, who are famed for their ability to throw artillery shells faster and harder than any other regiment. And then, of course, you have the Mordian Iron Guard, famed for looking damn dapper in those wonderful uniforms, having absolutely no sense of humour, and a love of parades. Although, don't let that fool you, these guys are deadly, deadly, deadly soldiers. You have the Vostroyan First and Only, a very cool looking regiment who essentially are made up of the first sons of Vostroya after a complicated incident that happened back in the Horus Heresy, where now the first sons of the planet all join the Imperial Guard. And they tend to have more antique or well-maintained weapons. It's a little bit of both. But they have a bit of a cyberpunky-ish look to them, which I rather like. It's pretty neat. And not only, as I previously mentioned, do you have infantry, tanks, and aircraft, you have all kinds of fun heavy weapons, you have veterans who, frankly, a veteran in an Imperial Guard regiment is basically an Imperial Guardsman who can last a couple days. After that, you're basically a veteran, and you've seen most of the horrors the galaxy can throw at you at this point. And you also have access to the Tempestus Scions. Technically speaking, a separate branch of the Imperial Guard. However, an Imperial Guard commander can call upon a squad or two of these fellas to come and, well, have fun. Trained to the same standard, and sometimes higher, as a commissar, which I will get to in a minute, these guys are your special ops. If the Imperial Guardsman is your, shall we say, basic soldier, these guys are the equivalent to Navy SEALs or commandos. They are badass mother. Well, you get what I mean. And your command staff is made up of all kinds of fun people. You have priests who will be yelling all kinds of encouragement to the Imperial Guard left, right and centre, typically speaking bashing the enemy over the head in close combat. You have psychers who, whilst commissars are fond of them, they will keep their eye on them and, well, point a pistol to the back of their head if they think they are going to start causing any warp shenanigan trouble. And the commissar. The commissar is essentially your morale officer. If morale officer was a guy with more or less no sense of humour, a fanatical love for the Emperor, and a bolt pistol with every single guardsman's name on it who decides to take a step backwards. Raised in the Commissariat, a branch of the Imperial Guard, commissars are political officers, doctrinal enforcers, and, well, they will punish and execute any and every soldier, no matter what their rank, who they judge to have failed in their duties to the God Emperor. This could be anything from looking back for a means of escape nervously, to not charging into a suicidal situation. Depending on the commissar, depends on how smart they are about whether an Imperial officer is being unfaithful to the Emperor or just trying to make a decision that makes the best sense. Lastly, the commanding officers. These are career soldiers. If they were really lucky, they will have managed to climb their way up the rank from an Imperial Guardsman all the way through veteran ranks to become platoon commanders and finally company commanders. And these commanders vary in tactical usage from bumbling buffoons with really wealthy parents who bought them titles and ranks, to trained hardened veterans who have seen everything the galaxy can offer and basically have managed to stand firm in the face of it. Rare, rare humans indeed. Now, this is more or less what makes up an Imperial Guard force. It is a massive organism made up of so many different elements, which makes it not at all surprising that to get an Imperial Guard army fully equipped and mobilized and targeting something is an astronomical achievement in and of itself, let alone travelling through the warp to get it there. Because of all these different branches and because of all this political shenanigans that have to happen in order for these entities to cooperate, frankly, it's a miracle that they can even achieve anything. The bureaucracy is so slow and sluggish, and what I'm trying to say is, an Imperial Guard army, a fully kitted out professional Imperial Guard army, is absolutely monstrous undertaking to deploy. This is why, despite the fact that the Imperium have thousands upon millions upon billions of troops, getting them in the right battlefield, in the right place at the right time, is half the battle in and of itself. And getting through the Imperial bureaucracy just to get it there is a war zone. Anyway, I'm going to call it there for the Imperial Guard intro video. I hope you've all enjoyed. I apologise again for the late upload. I will do my best to try and keep these coming. Please like and subscribe down below. Thank you all to the new and current subscribers. I appreciate your support so much. If you have the time, check out the Facebook page. If you're feeling really generous, please consider contributing to Patreon, as this helps me keep this entity moving. And I look forward to seeing you all soon. Until then, take care everyone.